Good evening, my fellow vampire lovers. The sun is going down, and you know what that means. It's time for me to record another episode of my podcast, The Beautiful Dead. As always, I'm your host, Lena Nazari. You can find me at lenanazari.com, join my fanged family, or you can just go to The Beautiful Dead Podcast on Instagram and follow me there. I don't do this a lot, but I'm actually saying subscribe, like, share the video, comment. It really does help me a lot, and it doesn't cost you anything. And I try not to ask, but sometimes I just have to remind people. I looked at the statistics. It looks like a lot of people watch it and don't subscribe. So, consider just hitting subscribe. It would help me a lot. What are we talking about? We're talking about From Dusk Till Dawn, which, yes, I have done before. I actually did it the first year of my podcast when it was audio only. So I didn't really know yet. Let's just say I was new. I don't want to listen to it. It probably is horribly cringe, but I didn't know yet what this podcast was going to be. It's ever evolving. It's always changing. And now that I'm on YouTube, I do want to bring some of those old ones to YouTube and redo them so that they're not audio only. So this is one of the ones that we are going to bring here now that I can hopefully show you snippets from the movie, but I don't know, YouTube's been weird about what I can share here recently. All right, so if you have never watched this channel, massive spoiler alert. I talk about everything, okay? I'm going to talk about it from beginning to end. So that is how we sort of break down the vampire universe, by summarizing the movie. So don't get mad at me if somehow you have not seen a movie from the mid-90s, because I'm going to ruin it for you. Let's talk about vampire crossovers, because there's actually a lot. So the first one, a lot of people don't remember. Salma Hayek, who plays Santanico Pandemonium in this movie, the chick with the snake, she was in a movie called Cirque du Freak, The Vampire Assistant, which I don't know if I've done it, but I don't know if a lot of people know that one. Tom Savini, our very own Pittsburgh Tom Savini, he was in this. He was in the Dusk Till Dawn TV show. He was in Lost Boys, The Tribe, which I promise I will do someday if I ever want to make myself sit through it again. Innocent Blood, which is a nice Pittsburgh vampire movie, which I have done. And Martin, another Pittsburgh vampire movie, which I have done. So Mr. Savini, he's here in my neighborhood. That's a Mr. Rogers reference. If you didn't know, he was from Pittsburgh. And then the big one, Danny Trejo was in this, and then he was in a movie called Vamp Father, which I promise I will find. He played himself in an episode of What We Do in the Shadows. He was in the Dusk Till Dawn TV show. He was in an episode of the show Blood Ties, not the movie. I did the movie already, but the show, which I promise I will do. He was in a movie called Slayer, and then he reprised his role in this movie when he was in the sequels From Dusk Till Dawn 2 and 3. So Danny Trejo loves a vampire movie, which we're here for that. All right, let's talk about it. So we open in a convenience store that's kind of in the middle of the desert. A sheriff pulls up, he enters this gas station, and clearly he knows the guy behind the counter because they're having some small talk, including the fact that there was a bank robbery not far from this town where several people were killed, and the men who did it are on their way to the Mexican border, which is going to put them right through this town. So everybody's kind of on high alert. The sheriff asks to use the bathroom, and when he's back there, two men approach the counter with guns, and they have two girls held hostage. They tell the clerk that he better get rid of this cop or everybody is going to die. The two men are Seth and Richard Gecko. They are brothers on the run, and they are the bank robbers that were just being discussed. They hear the toilet flush and they move to the back of the store again. While the sheriff and clerk are talking, Richard shoots the cop and says that the clerk was mouthing, "Help me." They then shoot the clerk. They start to argue. The girls run out, and that gives the clerk the time that he needs to pull a gun. A shootout ensues. It ends with the clerk dead. The store is on fire, and Richie has a gunshot wound through one of his hands. They hit the road, and we get our opening credits.
It's a dark night.
Richie uses duct tape as a bandage, and we see that there is a woman in the trunk of the car. They arrive at a motel and get a room for the night, quickly carrying the woman from the trunk into their room. Her hands are bound. She's clearly been crying. We find out that the brothers have to meet up with some men in Mexico, and that is how they're going to ensure their safety in Mexico. Seth is going to head to the border to check some things out and leaves Richie with their hostage. Richie asks the hostage if she wants to come over to the bed and watch TV with him, and she does. Now we cut to a diner. There's a family in a diner. Jacob is the father. His daughter is Kate, and the son is Scott. They're headed to Mexico in their RV, but the plan is to stop in El Paso to get some sleep for the night before they go into Mexico. We find out that Jacob is a pastor, but he left his position at the church and he's questioning his faith ever since his wife died in a car accident. Now we get a news segment, and it tells us that the brothers are responsible for 16 deaths so far, and every law enforcement officer in the area is looking for them. Seth returns to the motel with burgers. He tells his brother that they're going to need to meet up with the men in Mexico because that is going to ensure that they have a safe place to go. They're going to get protection from this, and it's going to help them hide out. And there's a rendezvous point that they're going to meet up at, and then they're just going to wait till the guy shows. He then steps into the bedroom, and through flashes, we see that Richie has brutally assaulted and then ended the life of this clerk. And from what the brother says, it is heavily implied that Richie has a history of brutalizing women. And this, I have to say, is such a good acting moment for George Clooney, because he is like,
Richard, what's wrong with you?
Before you flip out, okay, let me just explain what happened, all right?
Explain it to me. I need an explanation. What is the matter with you?
There's nothing wrong with me, brother. That woman tried to escape, and I did what I had to do.
No, the woman wouldn't have said shit if she had a mouthful of it.
Wrong.
Yeah.
his eyes are like twitching, and he keeps going, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? Did I do something? What is wrong with you? I mean, the reaction is so well acted. Now, Jacob and his kids are stopping at a motel for the night, and unfortunately, it is the same motel that these brothers are staying at. The brothers break into Jacob's room, they take the family hostage, and the plan is to get the RV and the family across the border into Mexico, get to the rendezvous point so they can meet up with these guys. And then once the brothers set up their new lives, then the family gets to go free. We experience a little bit of an intense scene at the border where the Border Patrol need to be convinced that this is just like a family on a vacation, and at one point they board the RV. It's very intense, but they manage to enter safely into Mexico. And this is when we get to see our rendezvous point, and that is a bar called The Titty Twister. I'm sure if you know this movie, you know the Titty Twister. And this bar is open from dusk till dawn, which is where we get our title. It is a wild place. It's beer, it's food, it's live girls, it's truckers and bikers. There's an amazing scene where Cheech Marin plays sort of like the head bodyguard, but he's almost like a carnival barker. And he has this big monologue that's trying to entice the men inside. Seth explains that Carlos, the man they're supposed to meet, will arrive by dawn. So they're going to head inside, they're going to drink, they're going to wait until Carlos shows up. Once Richie and Seth leave with Carlos, then the family is free to go. We head into the bar. We see it as a rowdy place with bikers and girls dancing on tables, and our bartender is our friend Danny Trejo, and there's like a back and forth about whether these people are allowed to be in the bar, but they end up being able to stay. They get drinks, they take a seat, and they're ready to just sit and wait for Carlos. This is when we're introduced to a couple of our side characters. So Tom Savini is Sex Machine. He's this very rowdy bar patron who has this gun that's like part of his belt that pops out and pops in. It's referred to as the cock gun. I can't make this stuff up. And then we also meet Frost, who is a tough as nails bar patron. He smokes a cigar, and then all of a sudden the lights drop. we're introduced to Santanico Pandemonium, and she comes out and dances with this huge snake. And then at the end of the dance, she slides her foot into Quentin Tarantino's mouth, pours beer down her leg and into Quentin Tarantino's mouth. I don't know anyone who has watched this movie and doesn't reference this scene. There's actually a fantastic joke in the movie Slay where they refer to this movie as the foot fetish movie. I'm so sorry for the clickety-clackies behind me because Juliet just has to be in and out and in and out and in and out. But this is actually the second time I've recorded this video, so I cannot stop again, or I will just not do it. So we're gonna stick it out. You and I are gonna stick it out, okay? There is a whole bunch of commentary about in the horror world about how Quentin Tarantino wrote the scene and then cast himself in the role. But hey man, good for you. So after Santanico dances, the head bouncer comes in, he gathers all the other bouncers, and their plan is to kick the brothers out. But a fight breaks out, and Danny Trejo is stabbed by Richie, and his hand is stabbed right in the gunshot wound, so it starts bleeding like crazy. Joseph notices that the blood that stabbed Danny Trejo is green. It's on the knife that stabbed him is green. Just as the blood is dripping, just pouring out of Richie's hand, and that sets off Santanico, who vamps out. This is when we get our first vampire. Richie, look out! She vamps out and she attacks Richie, and she is very snake-like if you haven't seen it. And I'm going to share as much as I can, but I just... frustration. Okay, I'm going to share as much as I can. So if you don't see anything, it's because I wasn't allowed to. She jumps on his back, and she's like snake woman, like half snake woman. And then she rips out his throat. Then the other dancers all start to shift. The bouncers start to shift, and they just start attacking all the bikers and all the patrons. It's an absolute bloodbath. Now the mariachi band turns into vampires, and they are playing a bass made out of a human torso. Frost flips a table upside down and uses it to stake 4 different vampires on the legs of the table. Seth has a showdown with Santanico and manages to kill her with a chandelier, and we see that the vampire's blood is in fact green. One of the vampire kills is this massive bouncer, and the kill happens by Frost punching into his chest and pulling out his heart, but the vampire is still going. So then Tom Savini comes over with a pencil and stakes the heart, and it kills the vampire. It's cheesy, but it's fun. It's a good vampire kill. So now we're down to Seth, Jacob, Frost, and Sex Machine, and they are showing down with 4 female vampires. And as this showdown happens, we see that when they're staked, they burst into flames. And then the mariachi band blows themselves up.
Now let's kill that fucking band. I can do that. Fuck you, everybody. Good night!
So, here's our first vampire pause, okay? If you were wondering, like, why hasn't Lena paused yet? That's because there's a lot to take in. So here's the thing. All of the vampires are different. Like, they look different, their fangs are different, they even die different. So some go up in flames, some turn into, like, goop, some just kind of disintegrate. Santanico, like I said, she looks like this, like, snake person, and then she has the snake. So she has this whole, like, Aztec snake goddess feel to her. But then there's others that just kind of look like humans with bright eyes and fangs. But then there's some that are absolutely grotesque. So it's possible that the costumers, the makeup people, the production people are like, let's do this, and let's do this, and let's do this. But as the vampire expert, I have to take what I see and apply it to this world, right? So that tells me, as the vampire person, there must be different species in this universe. So there's different types of vampires, which will look different and will die different. So that makes me think that like a whole bunch of different species of vampires kind of came together and created this nest. And that's what that means to me. So I'll do the best I can describing what they look like and how they die, but they are all very different. And the one thing we know for sure is stake to the heart. And we also know that they are strong, very strong. So the big fight stops. Seth gets down on the floor and tells his dead brother, I love you. And then Richie rises as a vampire and says, I love you too. So that tells us that they turn real fast. But even that is not consistent. Like the timing is not consistent for the turns. The men hold him down while Seth stakes him in the heart and he turns to goop. We're over an hour into the movie and this is the first time we hear the word vampire.
I know what's going on. We got a bunch of fucking vampires out there trying to get in here and suck our fucking blood. And that's it, plain and simple. And I don't want to hear anything about I don't believe in vampires. Because I don't fucking believe in vampires. What I believe in my own two eyes, and what I saw is fucking vampires.
And this is one of the things that I always love in a movie, which is where they're in this crazy situation. They all seem to be relatively normal people, but they know right away it's a vampire. At least Seth does. So Seth sits down and he's like, obviously they're vampires. And then there's a great moment where we hear flapping and someone says, what is that? And Seth goes, it's bats.
What is that? Don't know. First I thought it was just birds.
It's bats.
And then we see outside that there's like a shit ton of bats headed towards this bar. So it's the downside is they're trapped inside, but the upside is it also is trapping the bats out. Now, one of the vampire victims rises and he tries to kill Kate. So Sex Machine kills him and they're like, you and I, Kate and I, need to start staking victims. But unfortunately, Sex Machine is bitten. But of course, he hides it from everybody by putting his leather jacket on. Don't do that, okay? If you are in a life or death situation with things that bite to turn, so zombies, vampires, and you get bitten, tell your fellow people that you are bitten. It is going to come out, and then what's going to happen is you're going to kill another human before they inevitably take you down. So please, if you get bitten in this situation, tell your friends. So they start to talk through, and this is another trope I love. They start to talk through, what do we know about vampires? You know, so they're comparing notes. They start making crosses, and we get a really good Peter Cushing reference.
Wait a second. I mean, just look around. We got crosses all over the place. All you gotta do is put two sticks together. You got a cross.
Yeah, he's right. Peter Cushing does that all the time.
We learn that these vampire bodies tend to be softer than human because they mention, like, it's really easy to push table legs into them.
But these vamps, they have soft bodies. The texture of their skin is softer. They're mushier. You can push it right through them. Conceivably, if you hit one hard enough, take their head right off.
So we think we should be able to decapitate them easily. So even though they're physically strong, it seems like the physical body itself is a little more vulnerable. Seth tries to encourage Jacob to get his faith back because he's saying, like, you as a dude is not that helpful, but you as a holy man can bless that water, make these crosses, and get us out of here. It was a really good moment. I need some water. So then Frost is giving this like Vietnam themed speech about making it through tough times. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but Tom Savini is a Vietnam veteran. So that was all I could think about when I was watching this scene. But while everyone is listening to Frost, Sex Machine is starting to turn. So first he notices fangs and he's like running his tongue over them. Then one of his hands becomes sort of claw-like. And then he shows up behind Frost, bites his neck, and then bites Jacob's arm. Then there's an amazing scene where Frost throws him, and just as he's about to crash through the window, they're like, no shit!
Oh.
Frost stands up as a vampire, the window's broken out, and all the bats come flying in. So again, inconsistency with the turn, right? Because Frost turned in a matter of seconds. Sex Machine took 15 minutes. Richie was a little longer. So like, it's very inconsistent with how these vampires turn. But that's why we're going to go with the whole different species thing. So Seth and the kids make it into a back storeroom and lock themselves in. Jacob is hiding behind the bar as the room is filling with bats. He uses a baseball bat and a shotgun to make a cross, and then he sort of gathers his courage and he goes out to face the vampires. He prays aloud as he walks past them. He shoots any of the vampires that try to approach him, and then he backs down the hallway to join Seth and Kate and Scott. He does the right thing and immediately says, "I've been bitten."
Jacob, are you bit?
Yeah.
He says, "I probably have like an hour." Again, inconsistent timeline. But he wants to use that hour to get his kids safe to the RV and out of there. They gear up. He blesses water and he makes them swear that they will kill him as soon as he turns. Seth promises right away. He's like, "I promise." But the kids have a little trouble. Scott has a super soaker full of holy water. You know I love that one. I've mentioned this before. And they fight their way down the hall and into the main saloon. One vampire is upside down and he looks an awful lot like the human bat version of Gary Oldman's Dracula. Tell me I'm wrong. He looks a lot like that. They use a whip to rip off Sex Machine's head, which is ironic because he was the one that mentioned it. But then he grows another head that's like rodent-like, and he turns into like this like vampire dog / rat man. And tries to kill Seth, but Kate takes him out. Jacob fights Vampire Frost, and then as we see 3 more approach him, suddenly they back off, and Jacob turns, and Jacob is a vampire. Boo. He's a vampire. He bites Scott, who slams a holy water balloon into his face, and half his head melts off. And then Jacob shoots his dad, and then Scott is attacked by a whole group of vampires that are all like biting him and drinking from him, and Kate has to shoot her brother so he won't turn, and then he explodes and he takes out all the vamps that are eating him. It's heart-wrenching. So now we're down to Seth and Kate, and they're like back to back, and they're like moving around the room, and they don't have a lot of bullets left, but they see that the sun is rising and the sunlight is coming through the bullet holes. So they shoot more bullet holes in the wall, and so it's almost like that laser scene from Entrapment, like the little streams of sunlight look like lasers that they're kind of in the middle of, so the vampires can't get to them. And then they hear knocking on the door, and he's like, "It's Carlos, I'm here to meet my friend Seth." So they're like, "Kick down the door, get in here." And they kick down the door. The sunlight hits the disco ball. They run out as the vampires all start to explode. Kate comes up to Seth and is like, "Do you want some company?" And he says no. He ditches her in the desert, which I get it. She's like a teenage girl, and he's a bad guy, but also like she's just lost her entire family, and you just like walked away. Didn't even give her any of the money. So he heads off to his new life in Mexico. She drives away in the RV, and there's this camera pullback, and it shows you the back of the titty twister is like an Aztec temple, And the titty twister is just the top layer, and then the rest is all down in the mountain, and it's like an Aztec temple. And then you see all these abandoned vehicles. I'm talking thousands. So that tells us that the vampires have been killing for a very long time. And I will say, because I hadn't seen this movie in a while, the way that I always thought about it was like, man, if you wipe out all of your patrons every night, one, it's going to be hard to hide that, but two, you're wiping out your customer base. But then I watched it this time and I thought, no, I don't think that's what happened. I think normally they have a business, they pick off truckers and bikers here and there, like just enough to survive, and that's easy to hide, right? But that night, it just all was out of control and everybody lost control and it was just total chaos. But I don't think that was normally how the vampires operated. So I have a new appreciation now of what they were doing. And that is our end. So let's talk about tropes I love and tropes I hate. So I love the montage of the survivors preparing for battle. You know, the holy water balloons, the garlic, the crossbows, like that whole gearing up thing. Love that. I love vampire run businesses as a way to hunt. I love the idea of organizing, having a business that kind of lures in the right people, and it's just a way to hunt safely. And we love a good female-owned business. I mean, come on. Santanico obviously was the boss. We love a good women-run business. I love Saved by Sunlight, but I want to be specific about this. I hate when there's a quick sunrise, but I do love the Saved by Sunlight when they like in Fright Night, or when they throw the brick and the window crashes and now suddenly sunlight kills the vamp, or like Peter Cushing when he rips down the curtain and kills Dracula. I love that. I can't really think of anything in this that was like an overused trope that I hate or made me groan. I know I've told you guys I hate Saved by Faith, but that's more of like Fright Night where Peter Vincent is holding the cross and he's like, it doesn't work if you don't believe, and then somehow Peter Vincent manages to believe and the cross works. I hate that. But in this, it was very believable that Jacob had lost his faith and why he had lost his faith when he tells the story of how his wife died. Just heart-wrenching. So of course he's going to be questioning God. And then for him to like muster it up to save his children was very believable. So I love the way that they used it in this, and I will allow it, because it wasn't like ultimately they were saved by faith. They still had to be saved by the sunlight. But the whole idea of him like having to get it all back to save his kids, I enjoyed. So I'll allow it. All right, the ratings. This might surprise you because I think you're going to expect them to get a high sexiness score, but you're wrong. How sexy or alluring are the vampires? Well, so they use what they have, and what they have is that they are sexy women, but they're not sexier or more alluring because they're vampires. They're just hot chicks with no shirts on. So they use the sexiness to bring in the victims, but they don't have sex with the victims. They lure them in and then they kill them. So it's really more just about a tool, right? It's like putting a worm on a hook. And once they turn, they are not sexy at all. Not at all. I don't care. So I'm giving them just their honorary point. Like, I'm just giving them the 1 out of 10. I'm not giving them anything else. Nah, let's give them 2. Let's give them 2 out of 10 because Salma Hayek. Goodness gracious. They get a point just because of her. So 2 out of 10 onks for sexiness and allure. Now, how scary or evil are they? I mean, let's be honest. So when they shift, they're horrifying. And they can shift in these like rat dogmen and like snakes. And I mean, they are just terrifying when they shift. They're not, because of the soft bodies, like it's easy to stake them, but that means you have to get close to them, which I don't think is going to be that easy. And you have to remember too that they have organized and they're in this huge nest now, and they have successfully been picking off bikers and truckers for a very long time.
What's this stuff?
My guess is this little dive has been feeding on bikers and truckers for a long time.
So clearly they know what they're doing. They are definitely more scary than they are evil. Now, they're bound by the sun. And like I said, their bodies are a little softer, so that once you get close enough, they're easy to stake or decapitate, but you gotta get pretty close. So I'm gonna give them a solid 7 out of 10. Stakes to the heart for scariness and evil. They are much scarier than they are sexy. Now, my thoughts. I mean, what can I say? This is From Dusk Till Dawn, for goodness. I mean, it is a classic. It is one of those ones that I won't watch for a couple years and then I'll pop it in again. I love it every time. It's very Tarantino, but it's Tarantino's take on vampires. And I just love seeing different takes on vampires. This one was clever. It was well done. This is one of those ones that you could put on for somebody who doesn't like vampire or horror, but they like action and they like Tarantino, and they would probably love this one. So it's one that a lot of people can watch together. The acting is, stellar. The casting is unreal. The music is good. The setting is fantastic. I mean, everything about this movie works. And that's why it is the classic that it is. That's why it is a movie that so many people know. That being said, it spurred 2 sequels. From Dusk Till Dawn 2 and Dusk Till Dawn 3, which I have never watched. I've been terrified to watch them because I'm so sure they're going to be so bad. But what did I say? I want to do every vampire movie ever. And I have watched some pretty bad movies for this podcast. So I think it's time. I think it's time to watch it, and I want you to join me with this. So I looked. From Dusk Till Dawn 2 is on Pluto TV. You can stream it for free right now. So please go watch it. I'm gonna watch it, and then let's come back next week and let's talk about From Dusk Till Dawn 2. Is it a continuation of this one or just the same universe? I have no idea. So this will be so much fun. We're gonna watch it together for the first time. In the meantime, please like, subscribe. Down in the comments, put foot fetish. It will confuse anyone who did not make it to the end, and it will make me laugh so hard, and I need laughter right now. So please write foot fetish in the comments, and then come back next week. And of course I love you, and I wish you wicked hugs and bloody kisses. Good evening.
And big finish.